for it. I'm one of the last founding members still on it. I'm speaking here for myself. I do not represent EJTF in this forum. I do in other forums, but I specifically don't in here. That's a very political position. And since I've retired from the academy, I've been very political in saying you won't really have a choice about it. The talk today is starting with you. The generational differences in how we approach environmental decision making. And there's been a lot of it. The 73 million millennials, more than baby boomers. A quarter of the world in US population, a third of the voting population, 40% of the working population. Smarter too. Almost 40% have bachelor's degrees or higher. Boomers, 25%. So you're inheriting that. Even Republicans, 36% of millennial Republicans believe in anthropogenic climate change, twice as many as baby boomers. We are seeing an attitude, a generational, a shift that will be a bit frustrating for you, I think. 41% of all millennials have a social media account. There's been a 300% increase in millennials applying for graduate public health schools. You're science-oriented, you're issue-oriented, you have a global perspective, you transcend geographic and political borders. You might not even know this. I didn't know we were boomers when we were boomers, right? So how would you know you're a millennial at the same time? And what will happen is that you're inheriting sort of a mess, and there's a reason for it. And I ask you to suspend your judgment. Good, bad, greedy, ungreedy, all that. I don't suspend that judgment. It's not useful in sober, clear, and what you will need, harsh environmental decision making. Here's the outline today. The premises and results of U.S. environmental policy. I wrote the first book on the U.S. EPA, and it was the only book for about 5 years. There are better books now, but I know this area very well, and I've been advisor to the EPA under 3 different presidents on EJ. I'm going to talk about environmental justice. This is a big class. I don't know you. I don't know what you think it is, but I'm going to make it simple and clear for you. I'm going to talk about reparations, but not necessarily reparations for slavery or indigenous land loss, although that will be part of it. This is ecological reparations. It's a bit different. I've written about this for over 15 years. I've never talked about it in a public presentation. I'm trying to be retired, but when I see young faculty engaged in justice issues, I like to sort of help them out. So I was able to fill a slot for her today. And I'll give you some examples of old and new environmental policies. I'm going to talk about cap and trade. That's a harsh politic. It's an example of the old way. There's some problems with it. And I'm in the throes of those politics as we speak. So the premises and results of environmental policy, these are 4 topics I'm going to cover. These each could be a course. I have over 20 links in terms of research that you can see. So the premises of our environmental policy is the greatest good for the greatest number, utilitarianism. And it makes sort of sense. We think about that. Well, I have $10 and I have higher needs for that. I can get most of them, buy really cheap stuff and meet that need and forget about the rest. Sacrifice zones and environmental permits. I know I'm going fast. This is a tight presentation, so you might want to dig into it deeper with the PowerPoint. The greatest goods for the most powerful interests. The thing you inherit now is probably one of the greatest separations between rich and poor that we've had in Western modern history. We have a concentration of wealth higher than it's ever been, and it's not just the US, it's Europe. You are inheriting that. So when we talk about the greatest good for the greatest number, when you throw time on top of it, you end up talking about the greatest goods for the most powerful interests. Where is the power? Where is the power on this? Higher education? Maybe a tail that wags the dog. Where is it power in our industrial history? I call it FIRE for students, finance, insurance, and real estate. And they interact and they trade, and part of the regulations that lifted because of depression and then so forth. So this is the ethic of how we build this space, okay? I gotta rearrange this, go back and forth. I have some students here from my EJ class from Lewis and Clark Law School, just so you know. They're the EJ group there. They call themselves seedlings. So I'd like to welcome them. I gotta go through this quickly. So you have the cost of production plus profit equals price, okay? We're driven by profit. Now, I'm not judging that. I'm not saying you're greedy. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. It just is. It's just how it's been this way. Even underlying the idea of colonialization and manifest destiny. And this little formula have things external to it. When you're external to that formula, and my apologies to economists because I know this is much more complicated. We could do that, but we don't have time. When you're external to that, you're not counted in it, okay? You're not counted in that. It's an externality. There's two major externalities. Environmental impacts and public health impacts. Now there's some subsidiary ones like environmental enforcement. When I was teaching classes like this, I would spend about 3 classes just on enforcement because it's so sad when students realize how weak it really is. And I want you to know that. And so where do these externalities, what are they paid for by the public or not paid at all, just left? And that's where sacrifice zones come in. We pay it with taxes, we pay it with degraded ecosystems, degraded public health, and a lack of enforcement. We can get into this a little more, but what the cost of production plus profit equal price little formula means is that property values, loss and rent values, plus social costs, public health, environmental costs, and damage to ecosystems. I want to make sure, because this is not on your slide, our model has been a business model. Business first, government second. I'm not saying it's good or bad, it just is. What's in the cost of production? You should know it. Raw materials, labor, production, marketing, all the things that go to the bottom line. So that's what we have inherited in this country. Now, the big thing that's coming out, and it's a sad thing, but it is what it is. I try not to be judgmental. Let me go back. The big public health issue in the EJ community right now is epigenetic impacts. That is generational impacts from environmental exposures. We know what they are within our short lifetimes. We live to 70, we sleep a third of it, it takes a third of it to grow older, there's another third left, we're doing other things with that. So we have very short lifespans with this. With the rise of genetic testing and the ability to find out inherited issues from toxic exposures, we're seeing the remnants of slavery in our modern populations. So we are seeing a loss of inclusion of externalities create accumulations of public health and environmental deficits. You're living next to one, super fun. I'm an activist in that. I don't want to be sidetracked on it, but that's a big deal. So these sacrifice zones, here's a cancer alley, Baton Rouge, down to New Orleans. I lived in New Orleans. And there is Cancer Alley. There have been Shintech was the big PVC manufacturer that wanted to go in right next to all those oil companies. They grew there, they fished there, they lived there off the land. Flint, Michigan, you've heard about. You just heard about it from water. This is the problem you've inherited. We do environmental regulations by media, by water, and by air. We don't do them together. So in 1992, I was an expert witness in Flint, Michigan on an air case. They wanted to put an incinerator that burnt up lead painted houses right in the black community. It was called the Genesee Power Plant. And it was a permit. It was a permit. And we sort of kind of won. You know, they made a big issue and they brought their lawyer team out there. And we had a friendly judge and he gave us what we wanted. You know what we wanted? Cumulative impact assessment. Anyone know how to do that? Not then, not yet. You'll have to, you will. But we got what we wanted and the other side thought we won, so they dropped it. But we really, you know, we stopped it. And here it is, back again, Flint, Michigan. There's a lot of Flint, Michigans. There's a lot of Flint, Michigans. People are going to jail for criminal malfeasance in Flint, Michigan. That is to say that there are well-intended people in bureaucracies that just have their hands tied. But we're stretching this a little bit. This is a bad slide, I'm sorry. I was in a hurry to get this one out to you and I didn't bring it down. You want an example of a sacrifice zone? This is the most toxic zip code in Michigan. And I'm going to empower you with this, and I do it everywhere I go. I do it to cashiers, I do it to everyone. It's EJ Screen. And when I'm working with communities, what I'll say is, it's EJ Screen. And they relate to that because they're in angst. They're so frustrated and concerned and angry. So when you go to EJ Screen, you can find out, and you would need to know as a future environmental decision maker, where's the most toxic place in Oregon? There has to be one. Could be in the African American community in Portland, it could be out in the Dalles with all that, but we need to know the most toxic place. So here's what you inherit. And you're forced to. You don't have a choice. It's a forced inheritance. And the permit system is essentially permission granted by the state to put things into the land, air, and water that normally they could not because that's too risky to public health. Okay, that was the basis for it. It's a permission, but the attitude is one of entitlement. Like, I'm building a coal power manufacturing plant, I've applied for the permit, and you're going to give it to me. That's the attitude. So I see an EJTF person in the back. Oh, hey, hi, how you doing, Miles? He's a tremendous help for EJTF, and I so seldom see political, especially good ones, here with me, with the students. It's only since 1970. The EPA was formed, kind of. It's an interesting agency, mean and lean, double lawyer, meant to litigate and make environmental changes. For a permit, you don't even need to get a permit until you cross a threshold. You know, here I am in unregulated land, I crossed the threshold, now I have to do a permit. Guess who figures that out? The industry decides whether their emissions are high enough. Now there's some checks and balances along the way, because if people know what's going in and they know what's going out, they can figure it out. But there's a lot of high-paid lawyers and consultants and engineers working on these permits to get them through. There are many permits to a place. Where we are now has permits. PSU has permits. So imagine if you were self-reporting your grade. Oh, I think I got an A today. You know, self-reporting is not an accurate way to determine environmental impacts. This is on a good day. This is what you inherited. This is, roughly speaking, you had the externalities, they accumulated, and now we have a government picking up the slack, doing a permit system. Okay, what are we going to do? We got to do something with this, and they haven't done a good job. You're inheriting the leaks. Superfund's an example. And it's not just in the environment. So we have what's called fugitive emissions. We don't count those. Oil and gas has them in oil manufacturing processes. You can see it come out from the over 140,000 pipes and valves required in fuel refining. They don't even count it. We're petrochemical. It seems egregious, and I can sort of see the deer in the headlights were coming at me with this. But you can change this. You can this is going to change. You will have to be part of that change. And shadow emissions. Well, you have a big forest fire going on, but you have some chemicals you want to get rid of and you don't want to do the permit. Hey, you got a forest fire? Pump it out. Shadow emit. That doesn't smell like particulate matter at a forest fire, it smells like rubber. It must be special rubber trees. So that's a sneaky thing that industries, who are all different, do to each other. And then cross-media. You've got to jump on that. I told you about Flint, Michigan. In 1992, it was air toxics. Last 2 years, it's been Flint, Michigan, and water. The chemicals, especially heavy metals, don't just stay in one medium. They don't. They move through ecotones and ecosystems. And so what we get from this is sacrifice zones that get no or little protection for environmental laws. So enforcement model is compliance, not deterrence, not retribution, it's just compliance. So if you're driving along and you get a speeding ticket and you tell the officer, well, officer, I admit I did it, I sped. You get a 75% reduction of gravity for your offense. So if you're getting a $10 speeding ticket and you say you did it, it'd be $250. That's how environmental enforcement works. What's even more, if you show up for court, you say you're sorry, it goes away. They don't collect fines. They don't really do that. You would think they do, but there's no way, and it's even in the founding of the US EPA, that they will ever drive a business out of business through environmental regulation. They won't do that. This is what you inherit. So the issue often comes up with environmental justice, which I'm going to be quick and easy about this. It's the unequal distribution of environmental benefits and burdens, particularly over time. Now, the burdens are things, what I'm going to talk about is not to have enforcement of environmental laws. And the benefits that you get are the enforcement of environmental laws. So Superfund didn't really have great enforcement of water laws, which is how it made the national priorities list for cleanups. And it's the oldest Superfund in the United States. It hasn't been cleaned up. It just sits there. It just gets worse. It doesn't get better. I write voluminous notes on my material, and so to backtrack a little on Cancer Alley, I taught at Jackson State of Mississippi for a while. It's a historically black college and university, and really dove into that environmental justice issue with the African American community in Mississippi and the Choctaw, which is in Philadelphia, Mississippi, which is where the civil rights workers' bodies were buried in Mississippi burning, right on Choctaw land. And the chemical waste transfer trucking in on I-10 into Mississippi comes from all around. So you have the Cancer Alley is the colon of the nation. It's where all the waste is coming down, and it's a sacrifice zone state. So what we have is exploited people and exploited places. And this is why I'm pushing hard on ecological reparations districts. Ooh, time goes like that. So the sacrifice zone term is a term that is not in EPA parlance. They don't think like that. I'll tell you more about what that is, but I want you to know it's not an official term in a rule or regulation. So what they are is the lack of inclusion of public health and environmental issues. That was that. The toxics now, they've been able to chemically move around molecules to make them really get into our bodies. Through skin, eyes, prenatally, they have jacked up how pernicious toxics are, and they have accumulated. They haven't figured out risk. They don't synergize it, antagonize it, inert it, or add it. The 4 ways you can combine risk. And the government, I can't go into it now, but there's local, state, regional, federal. Local does land use, state has environmental policy, DEQ here, the feds, and EPA, there's 19 federal agencies that you pay for. So, exploited nature, exploited people, following the footsteps. And we'll see how this is the same thing right now with climate justice and climate change. We'll see it's the same exact dynamic. Slavery in the New World, these are the topics. Following the footsteps, slavery in the United States and the territory. Yellow tolerated slavery. August 20th, 1619 was the date that the first African came here unwillingly. And slavery lasted for quite a while here. I have lots of notes on this, I have lots of references in it, but to save time for your questions, I'm going to move quickly over this. This is traditional indigenous territories. There's a big issue on drawing a line in the sand and saying you own it if you're an indigenous person. You might own it while you're hunting that time of year, but not otherwise. It comes and goes with a relationship to the land, air, water around you. It's not a boundary line in terms of private property. Private property is another tough, big issue beyond the scope of today, but there is an author named Eric Freifogel who wrote about private property and sustainability. He spoke here. So we can find out, just looking at slavery and indigenous and Mexican land loss, we can find out where there's been exploited people. Now, can we find out where are there exploited environments? What does the dirt say? You know, Charles Darwin's favorite animal was the earthworm because it created dirt, covers the planet every 7 years. That dirt is very hard to create. So we can find this, and I'm politically pushing for a map, okay? A map of ecological reparations. And I've done it in writing for a long time, but I'm engaged in Salem with this in terms of climate justice and change and cap and trade. And I noticed that some from the governor's office right here, so I have to be careful. So the reparations, a map, a dynamic map, how to go. It isn't writing the reparations you might have heard, well, I have to write a check for slavery. It isn't just that. It's ecological. We've exploited people and places, so our reparations have to be to people and places. And there's good news around it. Oregon's doing some great things with this, leading the nation, in fact. The multiplier effect I'll get into, PSU did a study on this last year, I thought I'd mention it since I'm here. I can't really go into it. So this is what I was talking about. When I talk to EJ people and they hear this, well, okay, you know, Bob, the white guy talking about environmental justice, what you talking about that? What should go on? And this comes up. The inheritable genetic consequences of trauma to land and cultures of environmental justice communities. So this climate change issue is, yay, a public good, global climate change. Your cohort has to deal with it. And you've inherited this shoddy mechanism that made things worse for certain communities and for certain spaces. So this is a very easy example in terms of burning fossil fuels. If you live near a coal power plant, and a lot of EJ communities do, you're breathing that in and you have asthma. Your baby doesn't sleep at night. EJ tends to be matriarchal women, women of color as leaders, not me. And so this asthma issue is a horrendous issue. And that is relatively new. So then you have heat waves from global climate change, and that slams that community again. You cannot ignore these communities for climate policy. This is the fight. I was on a bi-coastal conference call with your senators yesterday about this. We only have a regional mid-Atlantic states on cap and trade. What does EJ want? I'll get into that if there's time, but the communities are impacted multiple times. But we are all impacted by climate change, but we are all not impacted people. We just aren't. And so I'm talking about empowerment. Is there any social workers in the room? Darn. I'm a lawyer, an urban planner, a social worker, and so I love social workers. They don't ever get elected. They just really try to personally help people. No fame with that. So they might not think this is empowerment. This is the beginning to empowerment. It's not that hard, really, when you think about it. Disaster planning. There's one for you. Geez, we might have disasters. Should we plan for them? Yeah, if you're a wealthy community, you can just hire a few planners that know climate and build dikes and keep the sea out. But not if you're a poor community. You don't have that. Resource allocation is a big word. I don't have time to go into it all, but municipal services like emergency responders, fire, police, those types of things that wouldn't just go home to their kids when an emergency came, but would go out and actually respond to those disasters. This is something that there will be jobs in. If that motivates you. It didn't always motivate me, but it might motivate you. But the mitigation planning, how to mitigate these climate changes, how to mitigate them. And I'm on the governor's climate cabinet, and I'm tired of hearing natural resource agencies say, well, we just should do energy conservation, and if those people would, whenever I hear those people, I light up. What people would those people be? And so it's poor people, and that's where it goes. This is not a classroom, and this is something else. Adaptation planning. There are South Sudan in Africa has been just smashed by droughts and fires and climate change. They have been doing adaptation planning and mitigation planning far beyond we have, because when they don't get rain, people starve. So we have other models outside of the US to do this. So how do we start this? First of all, I'm a bad starter. I'll come in there and I'll be talking about reparations. It'll be off-putting, and people will politely not include that. I'm talking about more incremental social change, a theory of incrementalism. Normally, 20 years ago, I would push that on you. I would say that's practical, that's safe. Not now. There's a paradigm change coming. And if you didn't have the social attitude I thought necessary for it, I'm going to be here talking to you. The method isn't brain surgery, although we have surgeons in the government, so I wonder how that goes. But the identified cumulative environmental health disparities and climate vulnerabilities and cross-reference to other indicators of socioeconomic health. You know where that comes from? Senator Elizabeth Warren, who would give 1/3 of her cap and trade money to vulnerable communities, trillions. Just the zeros just keep going. And Beto O'Rourke. There was a national reparations bill put forward in the House last fall that now wants a piece of this. So Governor Brown wants a national cap and trade policy, not an Oregonian one. If it's national, I'm going to dig down on EJ. On it, because it's different nationally. So we can do this. You could do this. And we can argue about the numbers. Let's say statistics, and you have an X and Y axes, you have bivariate analysis. You plot the little line, and there's these little dots around here. Well, what are those things? They're outliers. EJ are the outliers. We're the outliers on that. We are the communities that have been forgotten, and maybe we didn't want to interact with dominant culture in terms of this. So the word that they like to use, all the Democrats had a EJ forum in South Carolina last year. They are all embracing this. Nationally, people know the way to get things through is that you have to deal with a toxic community. You can't just ignore us anymore. I'm concerned about that. I'll be quick about it. Mar-a-Lago is a frontline community. They're not all EJ communities. There could be EJ communities that aren't climate frontline communities. But for a start, there's a big overlap that we can see. One thing that's not in the mix of things that EJ communities want, it's very simple. You would want it too. You probably have lived in these communities. Go to EJ Street, look up your zip code, see why certain people have asthma. And you want those polluters out. You want them out. You just want them out. EJ is so eloquent in a lot of ways. They're mothers for their children. They don't want a press conference. They don't want to litigate. They just want healthy children. So this is strengthen tools to mitigate environmental harms and build wealth in frontline communities. Just one thing on this tools. You have National Environmental Policy Act, and they have environmental impact statements, right? EIS, as they're called. That's a big whole process. That is not even enforceable for most federal agencies anymore. That has been gutted. they have made categorical exclusions, so things that should apply don't apply. When I was at thank you.